Need pause. Make sure the technology is actually working. You're so well behaved. I appreciate that. Great. Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's Meet the Candidates Forum. My name is Joe Ferrara. I serve as the president of the Board of Trustees of the I-Free Library. The event is hosted by the library's nonpartisan public service to inform our community ahead of the upcoming election. Before we begin, I want to briefly address an issue that has been part of the broader conversation in our community. There have been questions about the library serving as host and about my role as moderator. I understand those concerns. I think it's important to address them directly and transparently. At its core, the library is a place of creativity, curiosity, connection, and community. The mission is to inspire, educate, and inform, and providing a safe space for respectful civic dialogue is very much part of that mission. When it became clear that this forum would not be hosted by the PTA this year, the library stepped up forward to ensure the community would still have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates in a structured, respectful setting. As for my role this evening, yes, I have a long history in the community. I lived here for over 20 years and served for 12 years as Vice President of the Board of Education. I care deeply about the district and this town. It is also true that one of the candidates and I have previously run for the same seat. That is part of civic life in a small community. With that in mind, I had direct conversations with both candidates to ensure that tonight's format, structure, and approach are fair, balanced, and non-preferential. Both candidates have been fully engaged in that process and are here in good faith. We received dozens of thoughtful questions from the community to make this productive and time-efficient forum. Many similar questions have been combined. This allows the candidates to provide more complete and meaningful responses. Neither candidate has seen the questions in advance this evening, other than those included in the background materials that are at the tables that you can get either now or when you leave. The session is being recorded and will be made available shortly after the event, pending any technical issues. Following the formal portion of the program, both candidates have agreed to remain afterward to speak one-on-one with members of the community and to answer additional or more specific questions. We will begin this evening with opening statements. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to introduce themselves and share their perspectives. The order was determined by a coin flip at last night's school board meeting. Crystal won the flip and will go first in the opening statements, and Jay will go first with his closing statement. Following the opening statements, we will move into a series of 8 rounds of questions in topic areas of approach and leadership, budget and financial trade-offs, community trust and engagement, governance and operations, policy and state mandates, curriculum and instruction materials, school climate and school and student experience, and finally, future priorities and long-term vision. Each question will be asked of both candidates, and they will alternate who responds first. Each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to answer each question. They will receive a 30-second warning. Receive a 30-second warning and a notification when their time has expired to keep the program moving and ensure equal opportunities for both candidates. We will then conclude the formal portion of the evening with closing statements. Each candidate will again have up to 2 minutes. Throughout the program, I will keep us on time so we can cover as much as possible in the time we have. We ask that everyone remain respectful and hold reactions until the conclusion so we can maintain the tone of this conversation deserves. With that, we will begin with opening statements. Crystal is first.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Putnam Valley. First, want to thank the Putnam Valley Library for hosting this event and to my opponent for joining me tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about me and why I would like to continue to serve on the Board of Education. I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and my husband and I have been married happily for about 17 years now. We have 3 beautiful children, a high schooler, a middle schooler, and a little one who will take over the world one day. My husband serves as an NYPD police officer, and I've been in public education for over 19 years. Schools have always been my safe place, and it's always been the place where I feel most home. I started my career as a music teacher. As time passed, new opportunities came my way, and I found myself in school administration. As a principal, I'm most known for high expectations, organization, and turnaround leadership. I hold a bachelor's degree in music education and 3 master's degrees in music education, school leadership, and literacy and language. I also have an advanced certificate for district leadership, and I am currently pursuing my doctorate in educational leadership. I've also always been an active member of the PTA, but my favorite moments are snuggling with my kiddos after a long day at work. My husband and I decided to move our family to this beautiful town almost 8 years ago. We've never looked back. Our children have thrived in Putnam Valley, as have we. And we are so grateful to have found this beautiful community. My husband and I are also homeowners. And while we love it here, it's becoming increasingly challenging to remain here due to the increasing taxes. I believe that I'm the right person for this role because I value quality leadership, commitment, integrity, and excellence. I also believe it's a humbling opportunity to ensure that our students feel protected, loved, seen, and valued. I have the opportunity to care for the children of Putnam Valley, our children. I hope to continue to work alongside the district and our community to continue to build the Putnam Valley of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. People applause for the end, please. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Lee. My wife, Kristen, and I moved to Putnam Valley 11 years ago. We have 7 kids. 4 of them are goats. 3 of them are children. And truth is, I get one dad joke, and that's it, because being a dad is a big part of what I'm doing here. So the 3 kids are in 4th grade, 2nd grade, and going into pre-K, going into kindergarten next year. And I did the math, and they're going to be in the school system until the year 2039. So we're going to be in this system for a long time. If you have any questions about why I think it's important how our schools are, that's the number, 2039. We're going to be here for a long time. That's important. So my own background, I do not have any education background at all. I didn't study education. I'm not an administrator. This is a world that's not my own. My own background is I used to be a corporate financial lawyer on Wall Street during the financial crisis. Did that for a few years. Then founded a startup company, did that for a while, and then joined another startup company and built that company from 3 people to 150. So I've seen both the bottom and top of large organizations and how to build faculty and how to manage them. And then after that, moving to Putnam Valley in 2015, I started a furniture company. So I run my own furniture business. I'm a small business owner. That's why I'm able to look like this, which choose. And it's starting with a small table in my apartment, built a company that now sells across the US and Europe, and we're doing pretty well. And that is something where I'm in the trenches every day, but I'm also trying to manage the big picture of what it is to run an organization, how to manage people, how to manage money. And so the question is, what is an educator without education doing here? Someone insightful in the school told me, the people in the schools are actually education experts. We don't necessarily need more education on the board because they're represented and they will give you guidance. What we need on the board is the community, people with broader points of view, people who can step in and say, I don't really understand these things, and look at it with the bigger picture. So that's part of why I'm here. And I hope over the next hour, you'll see me the way I see myself, which is that I'm practical, I'm pragmatic. I approach things incrementally. I don't walk into situations with the end. Or
So we'll begin with a few questions focused on leadership and how each candidate approaches decision making. And we will go right back to Crystal. Board members often have to make decisions with incomplete information, competing viewpoints, and tight timelines. Question is, how would you describe your decision-making approach when faced with complex issues if you were a Board of Education member?
So having had 3 years of experience on the board, one of the things that I've recognized is that there is truly power in having 5 people. And when we don't have all of the facts that we need, when we don't have all of the information, when there are opposing viewpoints, it's really important that we be able to be active listeners. And so oftentimes when the 5 of us are in a room together alongside the district, alongside what we're hearing in the community, we come together, we allow each of us to be able to express what they feel is the right move in that moment and for what reasons. We go around, we listen, and then we weigh the facts. We weigh what we know. We also weigh what we don't know, and that's critically important. And we look at what is the greater impact. When decisions become really hard in a school district, the first thing we think about is how does that decision impact children? That is the number one factor. And oftentimes decisions become very easy when it's about kids. Once that is settled, we look at how are the staff now affected based on the decisions that we're making and the greater community. How are all of these pieces working together? And then lastly, what is the trajectory of this decision look like? What is the impact later on? And so we ask ourselves all those questions. We do debate quite a bit. And that's one of the things I appreciate most about the board is that we do come from different walks of life. We are not all educators. Thank you.
90 seconds, Mr.
Yeah, that's
You need the question asked again.
If you don't mind.
How would you describe your decision-making approach when faced with complex issues if you were a Board of Education member?
Oh, no question.
Well, the context with board members often make decisions with incomplete information, competing viewpoints, and tight timelines. How would you describe your decision-making approach when faced with complex issues if you were a Board of Education member?
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, I think this is something that we found a lot in business and law. I mean, problems often seem very complex, but the more you dig and the more you look into them, there's many different types of information that can help you inform things. And for a school district, there's direct input from the community, there's input from the students, from the teachers, but a lot of times there's also a lot of data that exists. And being able to look through the different layers of data and finding the reality is sometimes really hard to figure out. So I have a pretty broad view of things. I look for all sides of the conversation, all sides of an issue. I think if you've met or talked with me before, you'll find that I'm pretty open to things. This is what I tried to say the last part. I don't enter into any situation or problem thinking there's an answer beforehand. You look at the lay of the land, you look at what's available, and you do your best to make a good decision. And so this is coming up a lot actually in recent conversations. So there's a variety of issues that we'll probably get to. There's a lot of rhetoric around them that seems very clear, like who do we help, who do we hurt, we raise taxes, do we lower taxes? And also, if you really dig into those and really go deep, a lot of the answers I think are there, even though it doesn't seem that way, because it's very easy to get lost in the noise. So for me, it's pragmatic, it's practical, it's looking at all sides and trying to find a way to the best decision.
To build on that, this goes straight to you now. Many decisions require balancing academic priorities, student needs, staff support, and the impact on taxpayers. What factors would you weigh most heavily in your decision when priorities compete?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this entire conversation is about resource allocation. If you have infinite resources, things are available for students, it's pretty easy. You give everything we can. But on the other side, it's basically not so easy because money is not unlimited. So on the curriculum and the superintendent and the administration side, this is something I don't have as much visibility into. So I can't tell you what it takes to make the school system excellent because they have the reins and they have the big sense. It's up to us to decide whether we trust the direction they're taking, to be critical, and look at them and see whether the decision making they're making is good. On the resources side, I think one of the interesting things about this district is there's a lot of conversation around cutting. So how do we cut this? How do we cut that? And something that's been really interesting to me is that this district has found a lot of ways to grow things. So it's not just where in the budget we cut. It's how do we actually increase the budget for other programming. So there's things like the debt service repayment fund, which puts off like $1 million a year of revenue that we can reduce in tax payments. There's the Garrison free lunch program, putting another $30,000 into our tuition system. There's Garrison students building a world-class system where students want to come here and then bring in $500,000 a year. Now, if you look at the budget, it's like other local revenues, like a really boring line item. But to me, it's like a really exciting place where conversations are always, what do we cut? What do we cut? But I think there's places to grow. And it might just be the fact that I've been in business so much, but you can look at the budget, you can go lean, but really there's a lot of room for the growth and creativity. And I found that to be one of the most interesting things about what we've done with those priorities.
Crystal, any decision required balancing academic priorities, student needs, staff support, and impact on taxpayers. What factors weigh most heavily in your decisions when priorities compete?
So again, I think this is about looking at all sides of the conversation and the larger impact that decisions that we make have. Again, needing to hear all of the voices, gather all of the information, as much data as we possibly can to look at what is actually the need here. And then to see how can we get the biggest bang for our buck with the financial support that we do. Student need will always drive the decisions that the current board makes because we're all about kids. At the same time, we're also taxpayers in this community. And we understand that there's really not a commercial base here to be able to help us with that. And so again, it's a balancing act of really looking at, is it a need or is it a want? How much of a need is it? What is the timeline for this need? And how can we think creatively to be able to meet this need in a way that's fiscally responsible? And in a way that is not going to have unintended consequences that perhaps we didn't think about. I also think, you know, a big piece of this is, yes, what can we do to do an inventory about, are there things that are no longer needed in Putnam Valley because the needs and the wants of our community are now changing? Just because a program has existed for some time doesn't necessarily mean that it should continue or that it needs to continue. That's contingent upon student interest, parent interest, and community involvement. And so looking at all of the factors to be able to determine, how do we consistently review what's happening and make sure it's the right decision?
And you won't be surprised. Now turn to some more budget priorities and financial realities facing the district and our community questions. Crystal, school budgets are under pressure from rising costs, especially in areas like transportation, staffing, and mandated programs, while taxpayers are feeling financial strain. What is one difficult trade-off you would be willing to make to keep the district budget sustainable while maintaining strong programs, and how should the district balance rising costs with the financial strain many taxpayers are experiencing?
Yeah, this is always a conversation for us because, again, the pot is only so big and we have lots of priorities to meet. Student mandates, number one for us, because New York State says that we have to provide certain things to students and we have to ensure that we're compliant with that. Above and beyond that, we know that student mandates from New York are not the only things that schools are sensitive, right? We're in charge of building the whole child. And so we want to be able to provide amazing programs to our students that they enjoy, that will help them to find their people and figure out, you know, who they are as they grow up. In order to do that, though, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We have to really look at an inventory of what we're offering to students to ensure that it's essentially what they need in the moment. And so one of the cost saving things that I'm looking into is how to do an inventory, for example, of our clubs that we offer across the schools at this point. How many students are attending those clubs regularly? What has the attendance been like historically? Is there interest in that club? And again, maybe just because that club has been run for the last 15 years, maybe we can take a deeper look at that to see if we can reallocate those funds somewhere else, or perhaps close that club to be able to enhance a club that already exists that needs more resources. And so that's one of the ways I'm looking at how we can modify some of the numbers in our budget to be really about what kids need, not necessarily just what everybody wants, but what's actually working and how can we better it.
School budgets are under pressure from rising costs, especially in areas of transportation, staffing, and mandated programs, while taxpayers are feeling the strain. What is one difficult trade-off you'd be willing to keep the district budget sustainable while maintaining strong programs, and how should the district balance rising costs, financial strain many taxpayers are experiencing?
It seems like an evergreen problem for a school budget, because I did spend time looking at the budget and it looks like 71% of the costs are personnel costs, the future costs. I don't think that's a place we can trade off. That leaves you 29%, which is everything else. And through the conversations I had, it seems like there's not a lot of staff actually. And that cut, even if you try to find a cut somewhere, it's not really going to make a big difference. So this is like the eternal problem. If I were to think about it, it probably is some sort of a short-term trade-off versus a long-term trade-off. I think something the school has done really well is the transition to something like geothermal. You're going to have an upfront cost that's actually going to be a little bit higher than the funds, but over time those things pay off. So it's going to be a tough conversation for a board to make. Hey guys, going to come to you with a big project. It's going to cost a lot this year. You're going to have to trust that this type of investment is going to have a long-term payoff. I know I'm describing a win-win, so it's a bit of a squirrely answer, but I do think that putting like yourself on stake, you're putting putting now at stake for a longer future is a really meaningful thing, and the types of things the school system's already done, I think, are actually pretty impressive. So it's sort of a now versus the future type of perspective.
Okay, Jay, this goes to you. This is a long one with context, so be prepared. New York State recently updated the real property tax law, section 467, allowing local jurisdictions to increase the maximum senior citizen property tax exemption from 50% to 65%, raise eligibility limits to $58,400, while several surrounding counties and townships have adopted these new 65% levels. None of the local school districts have followed suit yet. Have yet followed suit. Sorry. Putnam Valley School District currently sits at a previous state maximum of 50%. While these exemptions do not change the district's overall spending budget, they do trigger a tax shift, meaning the tax burden is redistributed across the remaining non-exempt properties. This shift can provide vital relief to seniors on fixed incomes, but it also increases the financial responsibility for the residents, including lower income or single parent households who do not qualify for the exemption. Question: what is your position on adopting a new 65% exemption regulation for our district, and what specific economic or demographic data would you require to evaluate how this redistribution of the tax burden affects the overall financial health of our non-senior lower income family?
Okay, so there's my answer right now. There's where I think my answer will be in 6 months, and I'll explain. But right now, if you ask me, do I support bringing the senior exemption up to 65% and rolling it out? I'm at an 8% yes, because my overall principle is we should be spending our energy protecting those in need and protecting the vulnerable. So that's an easy principle to say. The real issue, though, is if we do push this exemption through, that's not the only group that's affected. So as you said, the tax rates will go up for everybody else. There will be some homeowners whose tax rates go to zero, and it's an open question whether zero is appropriate for any taxpayer in the district. But the third thing is that there's going to be a lot of people who are affected who still fall in that category. People on fixed incomes, people who are low incomes, single working parents, other seniors who just fall right above the line of low income. There's a whole group of people whose taxes are going to go up the second this exemption goes through. Now, if we made this decision 3 months ago when it was passed, you'd be flying blind because the town and the district don't have any income data to know who falls in what bucket. So you pass it, you see what happens, and you see who gets hurt, who actually benefits. We have the great fortune of the town having actually passed this exemption on a lower scale. And so by fall, I think we'll be able to see who actually gets affected, what their taxes look like, and who has to pay more or less. And with that data, we'll have a better sense of who's actually going to be the most impacted. Are we actually going to end up hurting more people vulnerable and helping some people who are vulnerable? Or is it actually going to be okay? We're going to help someone stay in their home and someone else's tax bill goes up by $5. I don't know the answer, but I think we will have better answers by.
You want the context, or are you not?
I'm good. I'll switch to one. No, this is a really important topic in our community right now. There's actually a lot of work happening in the Senate around certain tax bills, this being one of them. And so, you know, the conversation has really been about what's right for this community. And so the question was, where do I stand on it? So I'm going to answer that question. My philosophical view is that we should take care of our elderly in their golden age. They worked hard during their lifetime. If they were providing for their children and if they were saving for college for their children and scraping up every dime the way that my parents did, they may not have been able to save for retirement. And so, you know, people can assume that maybe they didn't have a retirement plan and they should have. But the reality is that that's not the case for everyone. And we don't know everybody's story in Putnam Valley. I would never assume to know that. But I do believe that we should take care of our children and we should take care of our elderly, which are our vulnerable populations. That being said, it is monumentally important, again, coming back to the decision-making process that we use, that we understand the viewpoints of all. And I will share that a colleague of mine mentioned to me that she's interacted with people who fall just above the cusp of being able to get that tax exemption and how much it would actually hurt them to have their taxes increased because the exemption went through. And so what we've lobbied for and asked for is for the community to come out and make your voices known so we can make an informed decision.
Thank you. Crystal, now we go on to focusing on community trust, communication, and engagement across the district. The context is, in recent years, many districts, including this one, have seen moments where trust between the community and school leadership has been tested. What specific steps would you take to improve trust and engagement between the district and the community?
So trust and transparency is everything. It's where everything begins. There must be truth between the community and the school district. It's a must. It's not a want. The school district is backed by its community or it's not. And we've all seen the repercussions of when that does not exist. And so building better trust is always the conversation. And it was certainly the conversation 3 years ago when I got on the board. The first thing that I said to the team was that we need to be transparent about our processes. And that includes having more conversation at the board table. There were often times where there was just not a lot of conversation about topics where I felt like if people were talking more, then the community would know more about what was actually happening. And now if you watch us, we talk all the time about certain issues. So transparency is huge. The other thing that I would say the district, could put its best foot forward in is the area of social media. We are obviously a social media town. And so I do think that we can do better in that area and make sure that we have appropriate pages that share all of the things that are happening in the school district so that our taxpayers understand where the money is actually going to. There's so much celebrating to be done in the Putnam Valley schools. We are really doing amazing work in so many areas. And sometimes I feel like we just sell ourselves short by not sharing it with the world. And so I really do think a better social media platform would actually help us in a very economical way to get the word out about what all of our hard-earned money is actually paying for.
I think there's two layers to this. One is one of the most eye-opening things about this campaign I've been on is sitting down with conversations. In the first few days of announcing, I got a couple emails in my inbox from people who I recognized, who were normally very much explaining to us on a lot of issues, and I sat down and talked to them. And those conversations were pretty amazing. And I think we've gotten pretty used to being divided and being on different sides of things. To sit and talk openly and respectfully about a lot of these really difficult issues, I think it's just an important thing. It's just an important thing to do. I think we've gotten used to where we sit and we sort of build our groups and we just try to push them. And that dialogue is something that I would have said in the past, but when it actually happened, I was like, this is probably the most valuable and rewarding thing. So I carry a lot of conversations with me. On the other side, I think a lot of these school issues are dry, kind of boring. They're kind of like hard to grasp in the community. I was on the other side of this. I think it's just like the way people get information is different and communication is different. I think maybe the day of the mailer and the newsletter is not really the way people get information anymore. And the bullet points about the budget priorities are really hard to digest. I'll look at the budget having had a lot of thoughts about it, and I'll be like, actually, every one of these points is in this mailer. But when I read that mailer, none of it's coming through. And so there's different ways of telling stories about explaining issues. I'm not very good at it, but I'm like trying to post new ways of talking about what seem like boring issues to me, like tax policy. And as I'm talking about it, I'm finding I'm super interested, and I think I found maybe like 3 other people who are really interested. But keep pushing in that direction, finding people where they are and finding where they get information, I think could be really powerful.
Okay. Jace, for you, feel free to not use the entire 90 seconds. A large portion of taxpayers do not currently have children in the school system, yet play a key role in funding and supporting it. How should the district better communicate with residents who do not currently have children in the schools?
How to communicate with them? I guess there's a couple layers to this. One is there's a senior community, probably has less children in schools, and then there's people who don't have kids. I think, just like I said before, there's different ways to get to different people. I think you basically have to find them where they are. If they're younger people and they're very social media savvy, and social media is where they are. I don't necessarily mean Facebook groups, but I mean, as you scroll through and there's interesting information that comes through, it should be there. And I don't know if it's just like your photos, but I think going back to storytelling and really trying to communicate the stakes of what things are and really trying to tell the story about why schools matter. I mean, it's hard to tell someone in a community that the schools should matter if they don't think the schools matter. So I don't know that we're going to be winning any converts if someone's like, I don't think the school matters. I'm like, well, it should matter. Kids should matter. Future does matter. I don't think that's really the way to go about it, but making these things more human, talking about them, and being real about it, I think is a very effective way to get through. On the senior side, I'm not a senior, so I don't necessarily know how information gets through and gets across. I have heard from people talking that a lot of people in the senior center don't feel like they're getting information, that no one's coming by to talk to them. They're just getting set mailers. I think bringing people in, often younger people, might be interesting. And I think if they're interested in having other people come by and talk about the schools and talk about these issues, that'd be a good way to get the information across. So it sort of goes back to the last point, which is communication is not just words, it's how you receive it. It's where you look for it.
I think a cup of coffee goes a really long way. And the reason why I say that is because genuine conversations with people, especially when amongst the senior population in Putnam Valley, there seems to be a lack of trust for the school district. that sitting down and having a conversation, and again, to Jay's point, even if we are not able to agree, or I'm not able to necessarily change your philosophy about what's happening in this season of your life and how you're supporting it, I can still listen and I can still do my best to understand your perspective. And I do believe that in having conversations like that, it's essentially an olive branch to be able to say, I'm willing to listen to you and your thoughts about this. Are you able to also hear me? Because the reality is, we all pretty much want the same thing. We want to be able to take care of each other. We all know that a strong community has strong schools, has strong seniors, and we want to be able to better each other. But it's important that we have difficult conversations. In those coffee cup conversations, to be able to talk about the real issues and why people feel the way they do. People don't wake up in the morning wanting to be angry. That's just not the way it works. People are angry because they have a concern, and oftentimes they don't feel heard and they don't feel like they have a seat at the table. When we all know that seniors in this community, especially the ones who've been here for a really long time, built the table. So they deserve to have a seat at the table. And we need to further those conversations.
Builds right on to the next question from you, Crystal.
Yep.
Some issues, whether policy, budget, or curriculum related, can create strong divisions within the community. How would you handle situations where the community is strongly divided on an issue?
So I think the theme tonight has been listening, working together, gathering the facts. I'm a person that I work all about data. I think opinions are great, but I'm kind of like the show me the money person, because numbers are really what matter. And when we're talking about budget, that's really what matters. And policy changes are needing to be made. We need to talk about why those policy changes need to be made. Again, having hard conversations respectfully, and affording people an opportunity to be able to say their piece. I think we also have to understand that everybody gets passionate once in a while, and we have to be able to read between the lines about what is this person actually communicating. In school, they teach us that behavior is a form of communication. So if a person is angry or a person is frustrated, right, there's a reason why. And we should be able to listen to each other and model that behavior so that others can follow suit. It's only until we start listening to each other to be able to truly understand that we're ever going to be able to come to some sort of agreement or happy medium. The issues are tough. People are on very different sides of that. But I do believe that if we work together, we can figure out ways to compromise so that each person feels like they've had their share of say, and that they've been heard, and that they've been a part of the decision-making process. Unified decision-making is the most wonderful way to unite people.
Some issues, whether policy, budget, or curriculum related, can create strong divisions within the community. How you handle situations where the community is strongly divided on an issue?
I think on a long-term basis, growing participation in general with the whole process with the schools is actually central to this. I mean, if you look at the voting rates over the last few years, we're in the low 20s. And so if you're in the low 20s with that many people, I mean, a lot of people are just not really engaged. If they're not engaged, that means misinformation can get out there. That means that misinformation can spread, and you can have a hardcore people giving a narrative of people who maybe aren't even involved in the school or in the town, and they will continue to give different narratives that lend to a sense of division in the community. More people in the community involved in the schools, seeing the day-to-day, seeing the issues up front, then it's easier to talk about these issues. So then the type of information that gets out there, the type of narratives, are no longer the prevailing narratives, because you have a large, healthy community of people talking about the real issues that they are. And I think it makes it harder for it to harden and get divided if there's just more people involved having real conversations about what's happening. So that's actually it.
Okay, Jake, we now shift to governance, how the board works, the administration, and functions effectively. The relationship among the board, superintendent, and school staff is critical to effective decision-making. A major ongoing challenge is ensuring that the board provides oversight without becoming involved in day-to-day operation. What does a healthy working relationship between the board, administration, and staff look like, and how should board balance oversight with respecting the role of district leadership?
Yeah, this is actually something I've been trying to learn a lot about as I try to figure out the exact function of the board. Initially coming in, you think about what it does, you think about what happens with the schools, and part of this is I'm an educator. What do I know about what the superintendent should be doing about the curriculum, right? And so what this comes down to, I think, in most governance, is you find people, you build mutual trust between the board and the administration, You trust them, but you also hold them accountable for the things they say. You guide them, and you also make sure that the things that it's like a principle I'm always gentle on, which is you do what you say you're going to do. It doesn't mean results. It means that you follow through on the commitments you make. And I think the board's job is to set direction, oversee the direction, but not necessarily get into the day-to-day of things, because that's not really what the function of the board is. It's really there as a voice of the community. It's there as a broader perspective. It's there to help guide, but it's not there to say this is how we should be teaching this class. So that type of relationship, as in all things, relies on communication. I think there should be multiple ways for the board to get information. Could be different avenues from the community, from the schools, from the administration itself. But there should also be a healthy mutual trust. The conversations not just don't just happen formally, but there are also ways to build informal trust and know that, you know what, I trust you, you trust me. Let's be able to talk honestly about things and not be completely at arm's length. So I think in all governance, that type of trust and accountability is centered.
Crystal, what does a healthy working relationship between board and administration staff look like, and how should the board balance oversight and respecting the role of district leadership?
I've had a lot of practice in this for the last few years, because this is where my role as a building administrator, my role as a mom, my role as a board member really have to be clearly defined. You know, the board's role is to hire and evaluate a superintendent. Their role is not to operate the day-to-day. When I'm at work, I operate my day-to-day, but when I'm in Putnam Valley, I have to respect the decisions of the superintendent, because essentially we, the board, are the ones who have said that he is fully capable and able to be able to lead the district. And so if we've put our trust in him as our leader, then he should be able to run the day-to-day. Now, that being said, that does not mean that we absolutely need to be silent about the things happening in the districts and the concerns that are happening. It does mean that we have a set protocol of communication, that when concerns are raised, they need to go through a protocol. But if people feel like they're not getting the answers they need, they can certainly reach out, and we will gladly connect them to the right people. This is what I would say. A healthy relationship is, yes, trusting the superintendent and making sure, by us following up and having accountability for ourselves, that he is leading with integrity and with the values that we've set as a board in Putnam Valley. It's very important to ensure that everyone is accountable. And the reason why the Board of Education exists is to provide a checks and balances system for the district so that there is an assurance of quality.
Okay, Crystal, this has got a lot of context, so be ready.
Right.
And now we look at how the district navigates state mandates and policy challenges at the local level. New York school districts are constantly required to implement a myriad of state mandates, ranging from the high-cost transition to electric school buses to the new requirements for climate education and literacy instruction. While these initiatives are often well-intended, they frequently arrive with limited state funding, forcing local districts to either cut existing programs or shift the financial burden to local taxpayers. Our district has a long tradition of staying under the state-mandated tax cap, but these increasing requirements make that balance harder to maintain each year. How should Putnam Valley strategically respond when state mandates, like the electric bus requirement, create significant financial or logistical strain on our local resources? And what is your plan for ensuring our students receive the state-required services without compromising our existing local programs or exceeding the tax cap?
Okay.
A lot.
That is a lot, and that is like more than a minute and 30 seconds. We're going to make it happen. So, state mandated services to ensure an equitable education are very different than something like EV buses. Students who require special education services absolutely deserve to get those services. Students who are ENL students, who are learning a new language, absolutely deserve to get their services, because that's what levels the playing field for them to be able to access education. EV buses are not anything that have to do with equity in education. EV buses are a bigger global perspective that's happening right now. And again, to Joe's point with the question, is a mandate that's happening without the financial backing that needs to be had. In instances like this, where the state mandates something that is absolutely not feasible, unity is essential in the community. It's not just our community, it's surrounding communities. And if you've noticed, I am so proud of us and other districts, because recently we have all put our foot down and said no. This is not feasible for us through the passing of an actual resolution where we have run the numbers. We have looked at the power available in our community. We have looked at what it would look like to build the infrastructure. And we also know how those EV buses will function in Putnam Valley, where it is very cold and very rugged. None of it is good. And so in this community, we have already said no and put our foot down and are banding with other communities to do the same.
One question.
Yeah.
How should Putnam Valley strategically respond when state mandates like electric bus requirements create significant financial and logistical strain on our local resources? And what is your plan for ensuring our students receive the state required services without compromising our existing local programs or exceeding the tax cap?
Yeah, so I think on the mandate stuff around education, like Crystal pointed out, I think there's a way to follow the rules on what they are, on education, on curriculum, on programs, special ed, stuff like that. On the EV bus issue, I think we're actually most aligned on this issue. There are some things that will come across that seem philosophically very appealing to us. You know, if you were to shorten it, I would say EV buses are great. The mandate is not so great. Something like the EV bus mandate is going to add $20 million to the budget over 7-10 years. And if you were to ask me in terms of prioritizing, which is the question, would I prioritize $20 million spent here? Would I want $20 million spent somewhere else? And the answer would be education somewhere else, not on the buses because of the mandate. I think reality situations like this is that the government, Albany, in different places, is going to have to find a different way to make it work. It's just not possible for us to implement something like this. Even if we say, yes, we want to follow the mandate, we want to approve EV buses, we need $20 million to go out with a bond, we're going to fail. I mean, in the last few years, 10 out of 31 districts tried to pass a bond to fund the buses, and 31 have tried, 10 have failed. And I think if it fails here, that would make perfect sense because it is not where our priorities are. So I think in the end, if the mandates don't work and they can't work and they're going to harm the school districts, then it is the board's job to say no to them. And I think if enough, and with mandates like this, with enough boards saying no, I'm pretty sure that the mandate is going to change. I think it's going to be longer, and I think it's going to have more funding. And then when that time comes, I think our district will be ready.
Okay, we're going to now move on to curriculum and how concerns about instructional materials are addressed. Across many communities, questions about curriculum and library materials have become more visible and at times contentious. Districts are often asked to respond when parents or residents raise concerns about specific books or instructional content. How should the district respond when parents or community members raise concerns about specific material?
Yeah, so I mean, my overall point is very simple. I don't think we ban books. I know they talk about restrictions, but to me, this is a book ban, and I just don't believe in banning books. There's a lot of layers to this. One is the legal side, which I'm not going to get into because it's an amendment. But on the more specific issue, a lot of these books are about different identities, about different histories, about different cultures. And from my view as someone with children, school should be an inclusive, supportive place. And if you can go into a school and suddenly materials about who you are, about your history, are no longer available to you, then that tells you that the school doesn't prioritize who you are as a person. And so if I can't see myself in my history lessons, if I can't see myself in the library, if I can't see that I am someone that the school is trying to teach about, provide materials about, that tells me the school actually doesn't quite welcome me, that I'm not supposed to be there. So in general, I think this parental rights movement is actually pretty interesting because I think parents do have rights. And instead of banning the books for everyone else, parents can choose to opt out. And so you actually see things like this around libraries where instead of pulling materials, they allow parents to opt out of materials. And after those pushes are made, you look and see how many people actually opt their children out. And the answer is no one really opts their children out. They just want to remove materials from school, from the libraries. So in general, this is the place where I'm pretty firm that removing materials and banning books is just not something that's acceptable to me.
Crystal, you want the question again?
Thank you, Bill. So I'm a firm believer that school should be about school, and that the home has a responsibility to teach their children their beliefs and set a foundation for their belief system, depending on who they are as a family and what their belief system is. I believe that children come to school to learn how to read, write, do math, do the skills that they're going to need to do in life. And while they are in those places, be able to learn how to find their people, socialize properly, and build really wonderful relationships. I know that this is a topic of high contention. And so 3 years ago, when I was asked this question, My answer is now still the same. At the end of the day, parents have the right to be able to choose what comes into their home. No book comes into my house without me approving it. And that's my prerogative as the mother of my children. And so if the school were to send a book home that did not align with the beliefs that we have in our home, then that book would go right back to school. And as a parent, I want to be able to maintain that right, because the school, yes, educates my child, but is not the sole entity of being in charge of my child. And the last thing that I would want is the school to start teaching my child something contrary to what we have taught them in our home, because our home will always precede what the school district teaches. And I will forever back the ability for parents to be able to be vocal about what comes into their home, beliefs that are spoken about, and such.
Okay, Krista, thank you. Next, we're going to focus on the student experience, including school climate and overall well-being. We have spent much of the evening discussing the district's governance and business, budgets, mandates, and tax shifts. However, Putnam Valley's core mission is to put the child first and foremost. Our students today navigate a world of rapid change and AI, yet they also have incredible opportunities through our diverse academic pathways, including the IB, advanced placement, OC technical programs. To truly put the child first, we must ensure that these programs aren't just available, but actually meet the unique social, emotional, and academic needs of every student. As a board member, how will you ensure that our K-12 learning experience evolves to keep students future ready while protecting their well-being, and what specific steps will you take to ensure that all pathways, whether IB, AP, or BOCES, are equally valued, accessible, and inclusive of the student voice in our decision-making process?
Okay, so there's a lot there. I think the first one is involvement. And being on the board, for me, was not my first level of involvement. I've been involved in my kids' classes. I've been class mom. I've been at events, whether they're in those events or not, just because I want to know about what's happening with our kids. Our kids should have a wide variety of pathways to be able to explore as they're figuring out what they would like to do in life. And their voice matters. And I think that's really where this conversation needs to go. It's about student voice. And so how is the school creating opportunities for student voice? One of the ways in which they do that is through the steering committee. And I've had a wonderful experience this year, not only being on all 3 steering committees, but specifically the high school steering committee. Our students are now really speaking up about the differences between IB and AP and the pathways that are available to them. BOCES, being able to have those opportunities and live them, we're actually getting the testimonials from kids of what they think is working and what they think is not working. And my job as a Board of Education member, when I'm in those circles, is to ensure that the student voice is being empowered. I also think that, talking to parents about these issues is important too. Some parents may want their children to have more AP classes because colleges might take more of that type of a credit depending on where the child wants to go. And so having these conversations as a community, but making sure that we're prioritizing student voice, for me, is absolutely the most important. And recently I've asked for there to be more student board presentations.
Question?
That's very good. So I don't think anyone knows what any child's going to be when they grow up. I think they've all got their own path. I think if you look at me, my path has gone all over the place. Actually, I realized today that my mother doesn't even know I'm running for school board. So we go in lots of different ways, right? And I think every child has a lot of potential and has their own particular path. And I don't think we know what that is. And so I actually do take issue a bit with the question. I think exposure and a wide variety of opportunities is actually central. But I think we have the ability to view all different paths as being having merit. But there's many different ways to success and many different ways to life. But I think if there's a child who's really into the arts and they want to be on Broadway, the school should be able to provide a path to see the arts and to end up on Broadway. If someone's going to end up on the Artemis 6 and set up a moon colony, the STEM program in IB should be a focus so that they can get there. Nothing about the setup of the school should ever be an impediment or lack an exposure to allow a person to find what path they're supposed to find. And I don't think we have any idea what that could mean. So I think that IB side for academics, the access to BOCES for a lot of the trades, I think the music program and a lot of those programs are all fantastic. And I think keeping a focus on the breadth of what an experience could be allows us in many ways to future-proof the children, because with the way things are moving, how quickly they're moving, none of us have any idea what it's going to look like when they graduate. I mean, the idea of being a lawyer now, I mean, looking at my colleagues now who used to be lawyers, AI is taking over everything. So you kind of push them down that path for graduation rates, legal rates, all that stuff is
Jay, schools today are balancing academic goals with increasing attention to student well-being, mental health, and inclusivity. How would you ensure that all students feel respected, supported, and safe in a diverse school community?
Yeah. So I think the idea of safety and supportiveness and inclusion are actually all part and parcel. I think that physical safety is, I think, being handled quite well by the district in general. But I think providing a supportive school environment actually goes back to my answer to the last question, is welcoming students as they are, welcoming students and giving them a path to express who they want to be, and providing the type of materials and curriculum that allow them to feel safe and comfortable, because if you don't feel safe in a place, you really can't learn. And so that supportive environment, I think, goes all the way from curriculum choices to what we teach, so they can see themselves in materials, all the way down to the support they need. If they need to have a counselor, they can speak to a counselor about some of the issues they're going through. So I think there's like a whole series of layers about the type of support an administration can provide to students beyond just the curriculum, and it should be a primary focus of what they're doing.
Crystal, how do you ensure all students feel respected, supported, and safe in a diverse school community?
So the research on school attendance talks about that oftentimes students who have poor attendance don't feel connected to the school in some way. Student connectedness is the number one way to help kids feel supported and to ensure that they're going to do well academically, actually. Because to Jay's point, if they don't feel safe in their building, emotionally, physically, then they're not going to be able to access learning as best as they could. That being said, I do believe that Putnam Valley stands above most districts in the way in which they embrace children. My own experience with my children, we moved at a very challenging time in our life here. All of the things were changing for my eldest child, including the fact that we had another one on the way. And I had a conversation with her third grade teacher and said, I'm really nervous about this shift. And she said, do not worry, I'm going to take care of your daughter. And she made that promise, and she did. And every teacher that has worked with my children knows what they do outside of school, knows what they care about, knows who they are as people. And I think that's what sets Putnam Valley apart, is that our educators know our kids as people before they know them as learners. And that's really what makes for an inclusive environment and a safe environment, is when you're able to connect with a mentor.
Crystal, topics like screen time, student stress, and overall school experience are frequently raised by both parents and educators. National trends show that 1 in 3 teenagers face mental health challenges, with 40% of students reporting persistent sadness, yet many continue to suffer in silence. Given our district's goal to cultivate a culture of resilience, beyond our district's professional staff and partner agencies such as Cove Care and Green Chimneys, how would you encourage student-led or peer-to-peer initiatives to reduce the stigma around seeking help? And how would you hold the administration accountable for ensuring these efforts reach our most vulnerable student population?
So student stress is real. I think students have I think they've always been stressed. What I think is different about now is the involvement of the level of technology that we have. Because what's happened is students have become isolated because they're constantly like this. The cell phone ban was actually, we thought it was going to be horrific in logistics, but it wound up to be a blessing, because the reports that we get from the schools are that students are actually talking to each other now. Their heads are up and not down. They're playing board games with one another. And so they're building social skills that truthfully many of the students in high school that are in high school now lost or never attained during the pandemic. And so I think that one of the remedies for this is actually relationship with people, sitting down at a meal with people, playing a game with people, having conversations with people, and getting away from technology, not to supplant it, because technology is also a blessing, but to teach our students how to monitor how much technology they use, and to be able to temper it with actual people that are in the room. And one of the things that I say to my kids is, don't miss what's happening because you're on your phone. there's life happening all around you. And so it's really a balance of building relationship and also helping students to manage stress through coping skills that they can build with others.
Okay, given our district's goal to cultivate cultural resilience beyond our district professional staff and partner agencies, Hope Care and Green Chimneys, how would you encourage student-led peer-to-peer initiatives to reduce the stigma around seeking help, and how would you hold the administration accountable for ensuring these efforts reach our most vulnerable student population?
Interestingly, I do also view this as being very linked to the technology side. I think that the access and the constant use of technology, especially as it's connected both in school and offline, is a major source of anxiety. And thinking about the problem in general, I worked in tech for 10 years, and over time, I realized that chances are that Mark Zuckerberg's kids aren't on Facebook and on Instagram. I'm pretty sure that Sergey Brin and Larry Page's kids don't use Chromebooks for half a day to do their homework. And I think the more time we spend locked in and not learning and not engaging with other people, the more it's easy to get sucked into the anxiety. I mean, personally, I've been on social media for the past 2 weeks as I'm running this campaign, and I'm feeling more anxiety than I have in the last 10 years of my life. And I think that translates in. So, I'm not coming in strong and saying remove all technology from classrooms, but I think this is a legitimate and serious problem. And if the people who sell these products don't use them, I don't know that we should be doing the same thing. You see that Google has reports where they say that their Chromebook program is actually leading to long-term user loyalty among students for a lifetime. And that's great for them. That's not great for us. And that's not why we brought them into schools. I think we've done pilots over years and thought technology could really change education for the better. But I think over time we're learning that might not be the case, and that these anxiety are real and could be linked to these products.
Here, exactly 8 o'clock. So we close with our main questions by looking ahead to the district's future and long-term priorities. Jay, with changing enrollment trends, evolving educational expectations, and financial pressures, districts are being asked to plan carefully for the future. What do you see as the single most important challenge facing the district today?
So I do think the single most important challenge, I've touched on this many times, it's sort of like the secret undergirding of this whole campaign, is just participation. I think we have a place where voting's low. I think that in many years, the trustees are uncontested, which means that no one talked about any issues. In many ways, and it's not because of me, but simply by entering this race and having it be a contested race, regardless of how differently we stand on things, has increased a lot of conversation and participation and interest in what the schools are doing. And I think that if we can't get a grip on that, can't get the community invested in, then the no votes, or the people who don't want to support the schools, don't want to fund the schools, will continue to hold their voice, and the people who are in the schools who want to invest further in the community might not have their voice heard. So for me, overall, it's how do we get the community more involved? And we've already talked a lot about the different tools and different paths to get there, but I think that's a challenge for a school to be successful and to thrive if the community is not fully bought in and fully involved.
Crystal, what do you see the single most important challenge facing the district today?
There are many, but I do believe that all of them will be better dealt with if we work on the trust between the community and the school district. Without that, we won't be able to deal with the EV bus mandate or any other mandates that come down from Albany at any point. We won't be able to deal with the budget as it has to increase because of what happens with inflation, and there is a 2% tax cap, and we are constantly trying to figure out how to manage raising taxes and providing what students need, lowering taxes and still providing what students need. But none of that can get done without a relationship. And so I think that relationship, trust, transparency have been the theme of tonight. We need to work on bringing our people together. We are all on the same side. I don't think there's anybody in here that would suggest that our children are not the future. They are. And they're going to lead us one day. And so we've got to figure out how to support them and how to give them the very best education possible, while at the same time figuring out a way for all of us to be able to stay here. Because the reality is that New York in general, not just Putnam Valley, is a very hard place to live, and it's a very hard place to remain. You can't, I don't know how people are in this state without having 2 people working in the family. It's just, it's really hard. And so we have to come together to solve these big issues to make sure our kids are successful.
Excellent. Now, take the left track. We end with, but we will go with closing statements, and Jay goes first.
Okay, I know I'm open with a goat joke, and I'm sorry, but I want to say that I take this very serious, right? And if you want to know how seriously, what would it take for you to go 6 years back in your photo roll to find a bathroom selfie and then put it on signs all across the city? That's how seriously I take this, and it's very weird for me to do that. And when I say seriously, there's just two parts for that. The first is fundamentally my alignment is I am supportive of the school system. I think the community built the school system, and I think it's now the community's role to support the school system in creating the best place for our students in the community and for our children. That's my fundamental alignment. I will send my heart into these schools until 2039, and there's nothing more important to me than that. The second half of this, though, is the role is trustee. So I looked up trustee as a lawyer to see what it meant. And the trustee's job is to have a fiduciary duty to the community. So it is, if I'm in this office, I'd be duty bound to represent the well-being of the community and to serve well. And I take that very seriously, but it's not something we can do from inside of a bubble. It's something we need input from. So this is a place where I would always want to talk to people. I want to meet people of all different opinions and learn as much as I can, because we can't reflect those priorities unless we're having those conversations. And some of the conversations I've had have been very intense and very interesting and very contrary, but all of those ideas are now in me and I carry them with me. And it doesn't mean I'm going to vote necessarily the way they want me to vote, but I've heard them and they're with me, and I think about them in ways I never thought about them before. And so one last note is I do want to say where we are now. We have two parents, both have 3 kids, both in the district. We're both supportive of the school. I think it's actually great. No matter which way this election goes, we have 2 candidates who are fundamentally supportive of the schools. And I do want to thank Crystal. Ever since I jumped into this race, Monday, the day the petitions were due, Crystal's been nothing but gracious and kind, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you all.
So it's no secret that Putnam Valley is a very, very special place. And while it may be true that I have a list of credentials on paper that make me a highly qualified candidate for this job, the reality is when I bring what I bring to this position, it's really through my heart as a mother, as an educator of a really long time, and as a leader. Those things I think really do set me apart. And I believe wholeheartedly in servant leadership and leading by example. While I'm a fierce advocate for students, I'm also an attentive listener. Many of the people in this room have called me for advice on how to deal with the educational system. And it's been my absolute joy to help them navigate, what we call alphabet soup in education. I've given much time and much effort. It is an incredible sacrifice to be on the Board of Education. And I do it not just because I have 3 children in the school district, but I do it because I get to ensure that all of the children in our school district are getting what they need, while also ensuring that the community members are somewhat satisfied. Small wins are really important. I believe accountability is also really important, and I think that that's something I've brought to the Board of Education that also sets me apart. Everybody has to do their job because everybody's job is important. From the secretary to the custodian to the teacher to the superintendent, everybody's got to do their job, and it's our job as board members to ensure that that is in fact happening, and when it's not, to be able to support it so that it can. I'm hoping to be reelected so that we can continue to work on the pivotal changes that are before us. And my goal, again, is to continue to build relationships between the community and the school district so that we can face those challenges together, as I mentioned earlier. I also am a proud bilingual speaker, and so I'm going to address some of my family, my Spanish family in the audience tonight. Mi promesa es servir, cuidar y hacer lo mejor posible para todos los estudiantes y también la comunidad. My promise is to serve, to care for, and to do the very best that I can for the students and for this amazing community, and also our staff. It's my desire to see every student in Putnam Valley be well prepared for their future. Thank you.
I want to thank both candidates for participating. Thank the staff of Putnam Valley Library for making tonight possible. I want to thank all of you for coming out to learn more about where the candidates stand on important issues involved in governing our school district as trustees and as elected voice of our community. You are welcome to enjoy the rest of your evening or stay and speak with the candidates one-on-one. They both agreed to stay. And finally, please remember, Tuesday, May 19th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at the elementary school is the vote. There will be 3 items on the ballot: the school district budget, the Board of Education trustee election, and the library budget. You can find out more at pbc.org and putnamvalleylibrary.org. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Which one? Which one?